Welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show. We appreciate you watching and listening. If you've made it this far and you found us, please like, subscribe, leave your questions, your comments. We love it all, whether you're watching on FanDuel TV, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on X, whatever it is, we appreciate it and we love it. And sometimes, Schlegs, you get some little nuggets, you get some gems that are breaking during the show. And today we have one of those beautiful gems that is breaking during the show. It appears that Bill, and by the way, we're going to have Bill Bender joining us here in the second segment, but it appears another Bill, a William Belichick, is reportedly engaged to Jordan Hudson. So it looks like kind of the media circus under control. You hadn't heard about it for a while. He said, hey, she's not a part of the football part. She's a part of a lot of the other elements of my life. And now these two crazy lovebird Schlegs, it looks like they may be getting married.
Wow. I mean, I'm kind of speechless. And I go back to that thing that we played, Bob, where it was like over, under. What did she do first? You know, they break off her get with
her date's a player, maybe. Yeah.
Exactly. And here we are. No, like they get engaged. Maybe that was one of them. I was hoping
it was
that one. I don't know where the money was on that one, but whoever bid on that, like they got a steal. Did not see this coming. And you know what? Kudos to Bill. Kudos to Bill, man. Like you still got it, bro. You still got it. Wild Bill.
He's always got it, man. Is that what she calls him, Schlegs? Wild Bill?
Wild Bill.
I mean,
Wild Bill Belichick.
This accelerated quickly.
It did.
And I thought, I was like, all right, there's no way that it's going to last and it's going to be real.
Oh, it's real now, baby.
Well, yeah, if it's real and they actually get married. Now, engagement, when we got engaged, it's what people are like, well, have you set a date? I'm like, not yet, but we're going to. And so I asked people, according to the headline, she's the only one saying that they're engaged. Well, if she's coming from it, that's 50% of the battle, Pat. As Pat just threw it up in a little chat screen there. I mean,
what if she was the only half that said they're engaged?
Well, I mean, listen,
like why do we have to hear from the other side? Like,
so here's
put a ring on it, just flash the ring.
And so if she has a ring, there's a couple of options. Either
she bought her own.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Either Bill bought it for her, or there's some elaborate ruse that she bought it for herself, which I can't imagine that being the case.
Which would be amazing if it was.
That would be that's the out of left field from God knows where. But if she's the one saying it, Schlegs, then I don't know who else would be a better source, like outside of Bill Belichick. She'll get arrested for elder abuse. I mean, listen, I have no idea what Bill's into. I mean, maybe it's kind of a oh gosh, I can't remember his name, a Marv Albert situation. Schlegs, are you a big fan of stilettos in your bag?
I mean, you know what though? Bill's probably thinking about this. It's like, I can go younger. I'm in my mid to late 70s.
I think he's 73 or 4.
Okay, so I'm only 7 years away from 80. So maybe my driving capabilities are gonna I know I got some cataracts or something on the horizon, and I need somebody to drive me around. I'm just going to go ahead and hook up and get engaged to this, sign a prenup, and here we go.
Wait, what are we talking about prenups, man? I mean, yeah. I mean, these two catbirds are in love.
They're all in.
Maybe they're all in. Like, who knows? Like this, there's a lot here, Schlegs.
There's so much
to be able to digest and understand. And I mean, do they go with a short engagement, quick marriage, like quick wedding? They go for a longer.
Honestly, they should have a new thing.
Maybe she's
That's
pregnant.
What I was going to say.
Yeah.
What is the over-under if that just occurred? Shotgun wedding. Baby's due in 5 months.
Oh, 5 months. Have they even been together for 4 months? I mean, she met him on the plane, Mile High Club. I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities.
Wild Bill, that's what they call him. That's what she calls him.
Is that what she calls him? Where have you heard that substantiated?
I mean, it's just corroborated by me right now. Could be.
Corroborated by me.
I'm 1/3 of it. I'm 1/3 of it, speaking into existence.
You're 1/3 of the relationship, Anthony Schlegel is. When you have two halves and you're a third, I like it. It's all in play. But this is wild, and I cannot believe that this is happening. Um, because I just read an article about how they brought in this PR dude to be able to kind of get control of the narrative, and Bill had gone on Ryan Clark's The Pivot. I think he'd been on with maybe Dan Patrick, and he's talking legitimately about his book, what made Tom Brady special. Played some of it this morning on the Morning Juice, and how he said Tom, like he's a point guard. Like there's three things that Tom did really well. Like number one, he's like, I told him he's got to get the ball out of his hand. He's like, we can't do anything until you get rid of the football, like handing it to someone else or throwing it to him. So get the ball out of your hand. We always need to keep moving forward. He's like, we never saw those, 3rd and 12s, because he's like, there's a 2nd and 10. It's probably going to be a 3rd and 5. And I think the last thing was like, he didn't make any dramatic, huge mistakes very often. And a lot of that was a function of the fact that he didn't put himself in position to make huge mistakes. So I'm reading that. That's like all on page, or I'm listening to him talk about that all on page 199. And then all of a sudden this nugget drops back out there. And I'm like, holy smokes. Like, can she go like a full week strikes without being in the news? That's what you got to ask yourself.
Hey, it's kind of like IG, right? Like the more you post, the more relevant you are, the more you pop up on people's feeds, the more they're going to engage with you. At least that's what they tell me. And I do a terrible job of social media, but that's what it is. Maybe I love the fact that they brought a PR firm to wrangle this in. And then Bill's like, Bill and her said, hold my beer. We're engaged, wrap your head around that one. But maybe, it also like Bill looks younger in the Carolina blue, it brings out his eyes. Maybe she found that attractive.
I don't know, man.
I need more videos and more content of them on the beach doing like Superman lifts with his legs.
Yeah. That's part of it. Okay. I promise we're going to get to some real football here, because there is one thing just as some things are beginning, there's other things that could be coming to an end. And
I knew you were going there.
Well, because I saw this, and this is one of the iconic rivalries, I think, in all of sport. Not as good as Ohio State, Michigan, but you start looking at all these different rivalries that we've seen go away, whether it's Bedlam, Oklahoma State, the Apple Cup, Nebraska, Oklahoma went away a while back. You saw Texas and A&M go away, but then that was rekindled and ultimately returned. And so some of those, that were so great, they're phenomenal. But we're going to go not to the football rivalry strikes. I want to go to USC and Notre Dame.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying. I said you can go to the next one then after that, like kind of new ones.
Well, we're going to have Bill after this, and so we're probably going to land on this for the next 3 or 4 minutes. And we can talk about those rivalries maybe later in the week. But when you see Notre Dame and USC, and that's a game that I guess if it was at USC, it was always the last game of the season. If it was at Notre Dame, it was earlier. And I was told because USC didn't want to play in the cold. But you remember like the iconic Coliseum, and then you look at Notre Dame, and they talk about the high grass and everything else that was going on. They talk about the Bush Push and all the great games that they've had throughout the years. If you could throw that Notre Dame deal coming up, Pat. And here's the thing. And so they're scheduled to play, I think, this year. And then Notre Dame wanted to do a long-term agreement, and USC, because of all their new Big Ten travel, I guess they only want to do a year-to-year agreements, which is crazy. You can't schedule like that, especially not for something that's been going on that long. And why USC? Do you want out of it? Like, do you not want to do this anymore? I don't understand. Like, I know that, hey, you joined the Big Ten. That was the decision you make. The Pac-12 only dissolved because of you and UCLA getting lured to the Big Ten. And so that was your prerogative to ultimately go there. And by doing that, it's something that's very, very disappointing, because now you're telling me it's too much travel and that you can't go play Notre Dame, which has always been something iconic.
And the fact, and the reason they probably want the 1 year maybe extension into 2026 is because in 2025 they're at Notre Dame. I believe it's, I don't know. I want to say, it's week 7, 10-18. So, hey, guess what? We'll do one more. That way you got to come to us. But I also kind of see it because if they, what is it going to do for your strength of schedule? If it's about finishing high in the, no. What I'm saying, time out. What I'm saying is, if the Big Ten goes to a 10-game conference and I only got 2 other games, It's like, man, could I get those 2 other games versus, low competitive, because my strength of schedule in the Big Ten is significantly greater than what the ACC is, because Notre Dame doesn't play a conference schedule. They play some teams, right? Like they have, like this year, they got A&M, they got Purdue,
and so
they got Boise, they got NC State, they got Navy, Boston College, Pitt, Syracuse, Stanford. What a gauntlet.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like they play 5 ACC schools every year. They play 2 of the service academies. So you're already at 7 games at that point. And sometimes they play Air Force in there for being a third. And so trying to figure that out, like Notre Dame is the one that wants to play. If you're USC, like they're the ones that are pulling out on this. It's not Notre Dame.
And like I know. And the reason they are is because Notre Dame's playing Boise and Navy and Boston College.
Notre Dame they play Navy every year.
I know.
They've always played Navy. And by the way, Navy was a 10 or 11 win team last year. Like, you saying that they were good or bad? That's not a question. That's an answer.
No, they're fine. Like, Army was the better one. Navy beat Army. I know.
Yeah, but they were both in contention to potentially be in the CFP last year.
But what I'm saying is Notre Dame needs USC for their strength of schedule more than USC needs Notre Dame, which is why it's not the most advantageous for them, especially if the Big Ten goes to a 10-game conference. Like, okay, and I only got 2 other games. Why would I want to – and my conference schedule is a gauntlet enough. Why do I need to add a Notre Dame onto that and only have 1 more?
I get it.
That's why I'm saying, like, Notre Dame needs USC because of the caliber of teams that they play versus USC needing a Notre Dame because they already have a significantly better conference.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to talk –
That was my why.
I get it. We're going to talk to Bill Bender about that coming up. But before we get to that, parents, athletes, protect what matters most with Export mouth guards, trusted by professional athletes and designed by NHL team dentists. Export mouth guards are scientifically tested to help absorb those high-impact hits to protect your teeth and your brain. Export mouth guards feature 3 layers of advanced protection, including a patented use of carbon fiber, custom fit to your own unique smile. They 3D print that bad boy for more protection, better performance, max comfort, and clear communication so you can focus on your game, not on your gear. Don't take chances with your safety. Visit exportguards.com/Bobby to save 15% on your order. Export, protect what matters most. Bill Bender to the sporting news coming up next. All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show, and we've got our guy Bill Bender here ready to join us. And Bill went to Fisher Catholic in Lancaster, Ohio, part of the diocese there, maybe a Notre Dame fan, maybe not. When I saw this come out, there was last night, Bill, or this morning, and that USC is looking to potentially go year to year with the rivalry with Notre Dame. I'm sure you've obviously heard that. How does that hit you?
Sad a little bit, but I'm not sure that USC is wrong here when you're playing a 9-game Big Ten schedule that they're playing. Like last year, for example, they opened with LSU, and then they play a 9-game schedule in Big Ten play, doing the travel there. So from USC's end, Bobby, I think they could recruit in the Midwest a little bit when they went to Notre Dame every other year. Now they're going to Ohio State, and they're going to Michigan, and they're going to Penn State. I mean, they were at Michigan last year. I don't think – do they play Ohio State this year? I don't think this year, but it's
next year. I think next year.
Then they have a home. So if you're USC and in their position, you can create Midwest rivalries with those schools, and maybe it's different than the historical bend of the Notre Dame rivalry. And then on the Notre Dame end, I think part of this was – They did this 12-year agreement with Clemson. And I like that rivalry with Clemson for them because every game they've played with the Tigers over the last decade has had a memorable moment, and it can get heated. And it seems in my lifetime, at least, Notre Dame's biggest rival has changed. It was Miami at one point. USC historically, Michigan and Michigan State were part of that. I've always said they should play Ohio State more because those games have been amazing. So you get what I'm saying. So as much as I'm sad about it, I think it makes sense for both sides in some ways.
I mean, for USC, like this year, they played Montana State, Georgia Southern, and then they got Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa, Oregon, UCLA. So you eliminate the Notre Dame, substitute them out for a Penn State, Ohio State, Indiana, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's like, why do we have to didn't bring Notre Dame on, and now we're just playing Georgia Southern and everybody else? When Notre Dame's schedule is a little bit of like hodgepodge, put it together, because you don't know the service academy year in and year out. Are they going to be good or are they not? They're playing in a completely different conference. I want to ask you this, though, Bill. Does a 73-year-old being able to pull a 24-year-old make kids want to go be recruited by that school more because their head coach has more clout than anybody else?
Question. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a loaded one. You're not bringing a weak question here. That engagement news I did not see.
Always bring it strong, Richard.
Yeah, they bring the engagement news I didn't know about until you guys came on. So I was listening to that. Good, good for Bill, like you said. If you're able to do that at that age, like good for you. But as we do these coach rankings, I'm trying to settle on. We're going to run these next week. We do the annual coach rankings 1 to 136. I'm starting to work through the spreadsheet now. And where would you put a Bill Belichick? Is he a top 25 college football coach, having never coached in the sport, but knowing that he's arguably, if not the greatest NFL coach of all time? Where does this news with Jordan land with players? That's what I'm most curious about. I mean, there's probably a couple guys on that roster that are her age. And, how does that go over in the locker room when that coach is the ultimate authority figure in the program? That is something that I'm like openly wondered about, knowing, how 18 to 24-year-old kids are.
It's very interesting. And there's all these prop bets that Schlegs and I talked last week. And one of them was like, what happens first? Like they get married or she dates a player. He gets fired or they get married, like all these different things. And the fact that there's an engagement that she's acknowledging reportedly is wild to me. So that's one half of it. And the other half, I guess, is if you've got a ring on your hand, Bill, I think that probably speaks to the actions that speak louder than potentially words in that situation. And it's wild because I just saw some stuff where they brought in someone from PR and it seemed like they just finally had this under control, where you saw Bill going on some other podcasts and, there's Dan Patrick, The Pivot, some other things. And it was all mostly about football. And it was all really good stuff coming out, talking about Tom Brady and his coaching style. And then all of a sudden, like, we're back here to this in the news again.
I think you said it best in the last segment that, she hasn't gone a week for the last month without being in the news. The CBS News interview happened, and then we had a week of almost like, I compared it to like a politician saying, hey, this is not what was said in the interview. And we saw that go on during election season. And this is with a football coach. And now, reportedly his fiance. So it will be interesting too, as we were talking about last week as well, that in that opener against TCU, you want to talk about a prop bet, Bobby. How about how many times will the camera pan to her during that football game? Is it over under what we saw with Taylor Swift and the Chiefs? I would say it's probably going to be in the same ballpark.
Well, I wonder what Bill's number was when he played back in the day, and if she rocks one of his jerseys, that would be amazing. Like tied up, and like I could totally see that. Hey, but I want to go back to your question because you're making this list of top 25 coaches, and that was a great question. And I'm just throwing names out there, right? Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, James Franklin, Marcus Freeman, Kalen DeBoer, Brian Kelly, Dion, Lane, whatever. Like honestly, the coach from Arizona State, Campbell Campbell from Iowa State, great coach. Where does he fit in there? Is he top 10 to you? He hasn't done anything at the college level, but we know what he's done in the NFL, which is unbelievable, 6 championships. Like, where do you put him in the mix?
I think he'll be right in that top 25 range, but can you really put him in the top 10 not coaching a game? One of the tabs I do for this and my process with this spreadsheet is I look at their overall record for their career, in college, and then I look at their career at their current school. So, right now
he's 0-0.
Right. So they're 0-0. And then I look at, for the coaches that have been around, a 3-year record. I think that's the best gauge of like how they're doing lately. And, you know, a stat you could use off of that is, for example, if you look at 3-year records, these coaches have an 80% winning percentage over the last 3 years. It's a list of Kirby, Ryan Day, Kalen DeBoer, James Franklin, Dan Lanning, and Marcus Freeman. Schlegs, you just listed all those guys. So that's like, to me, those are the guys in the top 10. And those are the guys that are tough to sort out. And it's funny, whenever we do this list, this one probably creates the most hatred, the most criticism, the most, you're just dead wrong about that. And I'll give you another example. Like Lane Kiffin, for example, by record and by, you know, accomplishments at Ole Miss, he's probably a top 15 coach, but he's the first name that always comes up with people. Like there's no way that Lane Kiffin could possibly be that. But when you look at the last 3 years, he's done well.
So how do you balance with that, Bill? Because the top coaches, I always love looking through this and seeing, you know, your list. And, you know, there hasn't, I don't know, I don't think Ryan Day's won it yet. I believe Earl Bruce was maybe the last coach at Ohio State to win Big Ten Coach of the Year. And so it's always balancing the expectations. They say they get the best players. Well, I've watched USC go 7-5. And we've seen Notre Dame struggle mightily. We've watched Alabama struggle. We've watched Texas be mediocre. You've watched Ohio State have, you know, a 6-6 year. So they say they've got these jobs, and yeah, you're at a big program and it recruits itself. And so that's how you have great players. And so how do you kind of balance, you know, what Kenny Dillingham does and what Matt Campbell does versus what
Kyle Whittingham at Utah.
Kyle Whittingham versus the, you know, Ohio State coach or the Georgia coach or maybe the Texas or Florida, like, because we've seen all of these programs, they can fall off at any point in time. So that just the inherent bias of, well, they're at a great school, so they just are always going to be good. I mean, Billy Napier was on life support last year, Bill, until, you know, DJ Lightweight does a great job and they saved his job and he did a great job coaching. And we speak about Lane. I mean, he beats Lane Kiffin at the end of the year to, you know, keep them alive and, you know, have things moving in the right direction. But how do you kind of balance those, the situation with like the coaching element when you're determining who's the best coaches in college football?
So we rank them 1 to 136. I think we're one of the few sites that does that. And, you know, I'm a glutton for punishment, obviously. But to me, you bring up a good point, because it's almost like 4 separate lists to me. You know, you have the group of 5 schools, and it's a little bit different trying to rank those guys. And then you mentioned the programs like Duke and Northwestern. And over the years, I remember David Cutcliffe was always ranked in our top 25, even though you'd be like, well, his record's like 55%, but it's at Duke. So the expectations there are different than a guy like Ryan Day, where you bring up an awesome point that with his winning percentage at Ohio State, I mean, it could just as easily be an underachieving program, and it's not. So, and to your point about the coach of the year, I remember one of my first jobs out of college, I was at the Newark Advocate as sports editor. And, you know, it was a long running, like, why is Jim Tressel not the coach of the year? When are they going to give it to him? Like they would pick, I think they picked every other coach in the Big Ten other than him at one point to be coach of the year, which was comical to me in some ways, because some of the as you guys know, even at a program like that, a coaching job can be different every single year. You could do a much better job at 11-1 one year as a coach than you might an 11-1 year another year. I think that's entirely possible.
And we say all that because you got James Franklin. It's always kind of ranked up there, but hasn't won a big one. Then you got a guy like Spencer Danielson, who's over at Boise, just like doing what they do. You know what I mean? And they have all the resources at Penn State, but somehow he just makes his way up there. Mind blowing. What else? We were talking about this, and I want to get your thoughts on, you know, allocation of resources, guys doing big contracts like Kirby Smart talked about. I just want guys to be able to come in here and not make more than seniors. And then we had a 5-star guy go to Miami again, you know, $2 to $2.5 million a year to sit the bench probably as a freshman, you know, and how that looks in your locker room. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that and how you've seen other teams just kind of divvy up that money differently and run their businesses differently now in college football.
Well, I mean, I remember when NIL started, the general consensus among coaches was that's not going to bleed into the locker room. That the guys will get their money. I was thinking there's no way that can be true, because I do wonder what maybe a senior thinks that's put in 4 years when somebody hasn't stepped on campus.
Look at that guy.
Right.
And
it has to be a thing. Now, with quarterbacks, you would probably accept that. I know you guys are defensive guys, but with quarterbacks, that's part of the game. They get paid more than everybody else in everything. So, but for a tackle or a defensive end, if they come in and somebody else is looking at that money, I don't know that. I've always wondered how sustainable this is, and that's why I think you and I have talked about this, Schlegs, that I at least think I would be a proponent that we move toward contracts to start your career. A 2-year contract to start your career, and then you can go from there. You get one free transfer. We can lock in. I don't know if we can do a salary cap in college football, but it's probably worth discussing.
Yeah, it'll be, well, if you have the contracts and you have, bargaining, and then you could maybe have that, and we'll see kind of how that goes. And it's interesting, Bill, like I said, you get to the NFL and guys didn't care. And I think you always the acknowledgement of quarterbacks that they get the best looking girls. They always have the best car. They get the best of everything. And they're the key to your success. And so guys always understand that. I guess the only problem is, like, when I see this is, hey, if you're Jeremiah Smith and you're coming in and you're getting paid pretty well, but then you're playing like that, no one cares. It's the guy who comes in, and as we know, there's great players. Like Santonio Holmes is a Super Bowl MVP. He redshirted, and that's fine. But if you're paying that guy like $2 million a year and he's sitting on the bench and, he's supposed to be this big time guy, like, I think that's where you can get some of the divisiveness can creep into the locker room, where there was a big commitment and there's an expectation that this guy's supposed to be really good, but maybe through no fault of his own, and maybe it's just youth, and maybe the next year he's really good, but just that first season he needs a little seasoning. And I think that's probably where that divide can potentially come. And I'm curious, like, to see, like you said, the sustainability of how that ultimately works.
Right. And I'll be honest, as a journalist and sports websites, we make a living off the all overpaid team and the all overrated team, and because negativity sells, unfortunately. And I'm not a proponent of that, but it does happen. So part of the problem with college football right now is we don't know exactly what these guys are getting paid. You have NIL valuation, sites and those kind of things. I know On3 tracks that, and we can guess, but I don't know exactly how much NIL Jeremiah Smith is making. And then that's hard to make those judgments. I actually think if we knew, then there would be a little bit more accountability, and this would make more sense, and there'd probably be better investments within the sport.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to have more with Bill Bennett of the Sporting News coming up next. All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show. Please like, subscribe, leave your comments, questions. We love it all. If you got any questions for Bill, you can always throw them in the chat as well. And make sure you check out all his great work at the Sporting News. We're talking about some of the coaches list earlier. And Bill, another question that I kind of had going through with this, and this is, Schlegs mentioned James Franklin. I think we can probably talk a little bit about him. And it's kind of the conversation you had with Ryan Day, and maybe you have that question with Steve Sarkisian. And until you ultimately win the big prize, everybody always has the question of big game record. And we start talking about their overall win percentage, Bill, and like that's something that's easy to quantify. And then people want to pull out this subjective term, big game record. So they're like, well, Ryan Day was, 2-6 in top 5 games. I'm like, but in top 10 games, he was like 8-6 or something like that. And like, is it at home? Is it on the road? But trying to quantify and put your hands around that when you're doing this, like, is that the most difficult part of all of that?
It's part of it, certainly. So let's talk about Ryan Day and Franklin both. So you mentioned the top 5 and top 10 stats, and the critics of that generally are the same people that say the polls don't matter. Polls always matter because you have a top 10 ranking and a top 5, and these are things that we can judge what a quote big game is. Now, James Franklin in the last 3 years. Here's the stat. I just did it about an hour ago. 34-8 in the last 3 years, 5-8 against ranked teams. So 29-0 when you're not ranked, 5-8 when you are. And I think that's where the James Franklin question is. Can they break through? On one hand, you could argue they did get to the semifinals. They did beat Boise State. They did beat easy path, sure, but they got to the semifinals. On the other hand, you could say, well, they haven't beat Ohio State since 16. They were getting beat by Michigan. Oregon beat them last year. When is this team going to do all these things? And it bleeds into this year, where I think they're going to be ranked as high as they've ever been ranked since 1997, when they were number 1 in the preseason poll. And can they do what Ohio State and Michigan have done the last 2 years and break through? And Bobby, I'm going to be honest. I mean, I can't say they can until they beat Ohio State. And they haven't done that since 2016.
Yeah, I guess, and it's what's interesting. You mentioned James Franklin, and I've talked to Penn State fans about this. I go, he wins every single game that he's supposed to win. Like, he loses some of the big ones, and like, I get ranked teams, like that's top 25, so he should probably have a better record in totality there. But the other side of that is you look at Marcus Freeman, who he beat A&M, they won some big games, but then you look at some of like the stinkers that he's laid down, and it's just trying to weigh that as a fan, like. I guess you'd probably rather have the big wins because those ultimately lead to things, and especially in an era now where that stinker of a loss isn't going to hurt you. But there is something to be said for the guy that always takes care of his business and makes all his layups.
Well, and speaking of making layups, like I think with Ryan Day, it gets taken for granted. Ohio State really hasn't lost a game they shouldn't have lost against an unranked team. Is it Purdue? It's been that long. So when you go, like Ryan Day's entire career, he's made all the layups. James Franklin, for the most part, has done that. And that's an interesting question, because as you were posing that, I'm thinking James Franklin and Penn State were dangerously close to playing Ohio State in the national championship game. Some should argue that, man, they blew that lead. They could have easily won that game, and we would have had an all Big Ten national championship game. And Penn State has played Ohio State close. We were talking about this last week as well, where over the last 15 years, you could say that's been the tougher game for Ohio State in totality than Michigan, Wisconsin, whoever. And it's just that inability to close in the close ones that has got to them. And the hype around this season is off the charts for them. And so I think that's the pressure point for James Franklin now. Can they break through?
Yeah, and the same thing goes true with, like, I want to go back to your point. Like, I mean, I coach for Urban, but in 14 you lose to Vautech, who is not very good at home. You almost lost to Cincinnati till I tackled a guy, right? Then you have the Iowa game where you go. That was a stinker of a game that Cincinnati won. Had to bring some juice, but then you had the Iowa game where you just got obliterated at Iowa. They were terrible. Then you had the Purdue game. Like, he just doesn't lose those games. But let's go back to this though, Bill. Now I ask you. And it's a two-parter. You take it wherever you want to go. James Franklin, Ryan Day, and Ohio State. But of these games, Ohio State, Michigan, obviously we know what that means. It's at Michigan this year. Penn State, Oregon earlier in the season, September 27th. Penn State, Ohio State. Like, what is the defining of those 3 games? Like, what is the defining game that you think hangs in the balance for James Franklin, Ohio State, whomever?
Well, I still think it's Ohio State, Michigan at the end of the year, but it's almost like they're like mile markers for me in the season. The Penn State Ohio State game does set the tone for the Big Ten race because the impact of that game. Last year is a great example that Ohio State was able to go on the road, close that game out with the running game, and at the time you're thinking, okay, Ohio State's going to play for the Big Ten championship, a rematch with Oregon. Things didn't work out that way, but I look at that as a mile marker. Same with Oregon. I mean, there's a lot of, on one hand, I'm impressed that Oregon was able to come in to the Big Ten and win it right away at regular season championship. We know what Ohio State did in the rematch, but I was skeptical that they could do that. I didn't think they could come in the conference right away and win and emerge as probably the other power in the conference. So to me, you could look at it that Oregon Penn State game is for the right to challenge Ohio State and for the right to challenge Michigan, because as somebody that's been to Big Ten Media Day over the years and grown up here, The Big Ten does revolve around Ohio State and Michigan and that rivalry and everything that comes with it, that Penn State's been trying to push through that for 30 years. And Oregon was kind of able to do it in 1 year. The stat I was pulling out, Dylan Gabriel beat Ohio State and Michigan last year in the regular season. There hadn't been a quarterback do that since like Kirk Cousins and Connor Cook. It doesn't happen often that you have a guy in the Big Ten beat those two schools in the same season.
Yeah, I got one for you. So Steely Matt threw out this. I was like, well, give me some questions, but Bradley chimed in, and I agree with him. Do you think Jim Knowles will be the difference for James Franklin this year? My only problem with that is they've always had good defense. It's been the offensive side of the ball being one-dimensional, a quarterback that can't throw it past 5 yards down the field. And then Bradley chimed in with their wide receiver room not being able to create separation against defensive backs. Like, do you think, though, that Jim Knowles can be the one that can elevate their program, or is it going to be status quo? Because they've always been very, very good defensively.
Well, and then the second question behind that from Bradley, it's the receivers is the difference with these two programs right now. Ohio State has a receiver room where I can make a case that whoever the fifth guy is on that depth chart right now, Mylan Graham, for example, he's not fifth. Mylan Graham would be Penn State's best receiver.
For sure.
Like, there you go. And
I mean, for sure.
Carnell Tate would be Penn State's best receiver. And that's the difference between the programs. Now, as for the defense, to your point, they were good with Manny Diaz. They were good with Tom Allen. Tom Allen did a really nice job with that unit last year and putting Abdul Carter in the right spots to get to the quarterback. They do have some difference makers on that side of the ball. But as you guys know, Jim Knowles' scheme is a little bit different. Relies on the safeties. Not traditional. And I think I'm not a defensive expert by any means, but I've said over the years with Ohio State, with Penn State, with elite defenses, Miami back in the day, you can almost play it like an NFL scheme, right? Because you have the talent to do it. I don't know that you need exotic defenses with those guys, but we'll see how he changes schematically, and that'll be the big question. Because at Penn State, they have the talent. So I think the bigger difference is, did they change enough in that receiver room for Drew Aller that they can threaten teams with something other than the two running backs?
Absolutely. It's going to be a great question, Bill, and we'll see how that all breaks. We kept you way too long today. We appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy man. Thank you for being flexible for us. And everyone, guys, go check out Bill's great stuff on the Sporting News.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for having me on. I'll talk to you next week.
See you, Richard.
Absolutely. Great conversation.
He loves yoga. He loves Bikram yoga.
Bill or
Bill does.
Okay.
Now, Richard.
Absolutely. Doing great. Well, I want to tell you about our friends over at Backer. That's bckr.com. Brand new Buckeye gear, high performance gear, high quality gear. It's going to be absolutely tremendous. So go to bckr.com to check it out, whether it's their high quality raincoats, the windbreakers, the winter coats, their sweet hats, premium product. It's got a premium price to it. Some of those dollars go back to Ohio State athletes, which is what you love to see. But if you love the high-end outdoor gear for the skiing, the fishing, the golf, the hunting, it's going to be just like that for you. It's got all the features, all the bells and whistles. So use promo code Bobby, all caps, BOBBY, at checkout for free expedited shipping. Again, that's Backer, bckr.com. Headlines coming up next. All right, Schleiks. We always talk about Ohio State and how great they are at a lot of sports, and it's been awesome. They're one of, I think, maybe the only or one of one or two or three schools that have won a national championship in men's basketball, football, and baseball. And the baseball championship was a while back, I think in 1960. What's amazing is they did all that over like a 4-year period. Because they won, I think, a national championship in 61 for football. They won one in basketball in 60, and I think they won baseball in 60. So you want to talk about a nice little 12-month stretch there. Pretty darn impressive. Awesome to see with that. So if we could throw up this, and this is the little, I love a good Venn diagram, Schleiks, and this has the overlays of this, and this was kind of disappointing, a little disheartening to see, where it was the men's programs for football, basketball, and baseball that finished in the top 25. And so you've got Bama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Clemson all in the middle of that. And I wanted to have some overlap there with, one of the other programs, but alas, Schlegs, unfortunately, it didn't happen. Baseball, not great this year. Basketball was on the cusp of getting into the tournament, kind of faded a little bit late. Your thoughts?
So many thoughts. It goes into baseball is tough, man, because if you look at those, I mean, all those teams besides Oregon, they're in the South. Baseball definitely can come up. You got maybe you could do some more with the resources of being inside, but those schools all travel. They all go play in the South to start their season. The basketball, I think, can come up, but it's hard to do, And the other thing would be like in totality, I mean, there's probably 2 or 3 schools that have as many sports as we have as well. So it's different when you look at an Alabama that has 16 sports or 17 sports, Clemson and the Tennessee versus a school that has twice as many sports. The dollars that I have, allocated to them also put a little pinch point on what do we do for baseball in an indoor facility and bringing that here. You can do it. It needs to be done. That's in the men's games. That is the staple. So
I do think we have this. I like Diebler. He's young. He's got, obviously he did a great job finishing up as the interim coach. I think this year things got a little sideways with some of the roster stuff that's going on. I think he'll get that figured out. And then last year they brought in Justin Hare from Campbell, who was really good when he was at Campbell. He's an Ohio guy, Schlegs. They brought him in. It was a rough year. They had a lot of guys leave in the portal. And so hopefully there's a dedication, a commitment to being able to do that. I love Coach Hare. I think he's doing a really good job. It's been bumpy. Man, they've got taken some tough losses. But here's my thing. If you think you have the right guys at the helm, and you have 3 pretty young coaches. I mean, Ryan's very young. Coach Hare's a pretty young dude. And then Diebler's around, I think he's younger than me, for heaven's sake. Definitely younger than you, Schlegs. And so you think you have the right guys, get them the resources. This was Bill Belichick's thing with players. A coach's job is to put your players in the best position to be able to have success, find out what they do well, lean into that, help them in areas that they struggle, and then let them go. And I think that's Ross Bjork's same plan. I think they've got good pieces here. Get them, help try to support the resources, figure out what they need, where their deficiencies are, and allow them to move forward. And so I look for big things with Jake moving forward. He's very honest. He talks a lot about it. So we might actually, I might see if he wants to come on the show at some point. Great dude. And, Coach Hare even as well, Justin Hare on the baseball side, because he came from Campbell, which was a mid-major that was really good. Like they were a regular tournament period. I think they'd been to the Supers. They had some success. So
I think they're the Camels.
The Campbell Camels?
Yeah, I think so.
That's phenomenal if that's the case. So that's pretty terrific there, Schlegs. But that is today's headlines. Headlines is brought to you by our friends over at Lake Spur Marketing. They're the full-service marketing professionals, the agency, the trust, the strategy, the performance. They've got it all. They shield you and your team from the outside noise and cold callers, so Lake Spur lets you do what you do best, work on your business. The experience, they've got it. Over 100 years of marketing experience. They eliminate waste. They deliver on budget. They don't chase the clicks. Lake Spur builds the partnerships. Lake Spur Marketing, the proof is in the partners. We got our tailgate talk coming up next. All right, so this question came up, Schlegs, and it was interesting in the chat about James Franklin, about their receivers, and will their receivers, still be the issue essentially? I don't know where that was. Who you said threw that up?
Bradley.
Yeah, Riley threw that up in the chat. Yeah, or Bradley. Will PSU's wide receiver room still hamstring from winning the big games? I think so. I mean, they've tried to renovate it some and upgrade it. They did a better job. I think part of it was some of the play calling. Like, people don't realize Ohio State's got really good receiver, Schlegs, but also Brian Hartline's a great receiver coach. And Brian, and then was Chip before, like they did a great job scheming things open. And
Yeah.
so they had stuff that, like, we have great receivers and we're running great plays. So those guys, as you see, they're going to be put in the best position to have success.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, what was it? Take the opening play of the Oregon game to G. Scott on the sideline for 30. It's like, and then the Rose Bowl Oregon game they ran that play earlier in the first game, I remember, but it was Jeremiah Smith. They ran it with G, but it was Jeremiah Smith on the under that he ended up scoring a touchdown on. Like, they schemed all of those things open, window dressing, different personnel in different spots, being able to run the same play. Like, they are actively creating ways of them getting open, as opposed to like, set the ball down. This is what we do. It's methodical. Right. And then also like Drew Aller's decision making.
Yeah.
And being conservative, because you have such a great defense. When you have an offense the way that we are, and then you trust your defense, you can do more things. You play cautiously aggressive, meaning, okay, if we don't get it here, boom, we'll punt the ball. Defense has to move it. We trust our defense. Boom, hey, we got it here. We want to go be able to score. It's fourth and short, third and short. We can take a shot and still get it on fourth down. We're going to make that. We got 2 plays to get one. Fine. Like, they're going to do that because of the defense, but they're cautiously aggressive.
Yeah.
And I just think that Penn State in those times, something even brought there McSorley when he was just ripped. I remember that game where he was just running through, breaking the pocket, just moving the chains, fourth and short, don't run them. And they lose the game. It's those calls. You're just like, what are we talking about? I don't think they've ever had an identity on offense. That's kind of their problem.
Absolutely. All right. Coming up next, we're going to wrap up the show with our guy, Anthony Schlegel, and his parting thoughts. All right, Schlegs, I'm about ready to jump on XM here coming up at noon. Give us the 3 things, the advice from, I forget who you said. It was your neighbor, your Tim, don't trust the fart. What are they?
No, man, that's Uncle Coach Mike at All Lines Technology up there in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
Super techie guy.
So give us the lines.
Yeah, the parting thoughts. This was over the graduation weekend. It's something that we should all, if you're over 40, he says if you're over 50, but I say, hey, guess what? Why not start young? Building great habits in your life. And it goes like this. Never pass up a bathroom. And I agree with that, especially if you're somebody that hydrates the way that I do. And studies do show if you consume 2.5 liters of water, you're more likely to gain muscle mass. I like that, but you're going to be hydrated, so you got to use the bathroom. Never pass a bathroom. Never trust a fart, especially in the squat rack. Make sure you get that out prior to. Okay, but never trust a fart. Lastly, never waste a boner, because you never know when the next one's going to happen.
Gosh, those are some great lines to live by.
Thank you, Uncle Coach Mike.
Show. Big show for you tomorrow. Stay locked in here on the Bobby Carpenter Show.